All right. Yo, what's up? This is gonna be a reaction to Tainted Marth's Creepypasta. I haven't watched it yet, but yeah, I am looking forward to it. Apparently it's really scary, and I'm a scaredy cat. Let's see if it's really scary. But yeah, before I start, I'm just gonna do a quick sound check and I'm gonna share this with some people. Yeah, don't forget to like the stream and go. You should all go and throw a like and sub to Marth's video, Tainted Marth's video. That all means so much to me. Chat. I want chat to be up. All right, perfect. Well, what's up, Kuso? It's not that scary, Marth. I'm gonna literally scream my socks off. Yeah, sounds good. Is there a... Yeah, there is. Okay, I'm gonna share it here. Gonna share it here. Gonna share it here. Where's the Eternal Dawn? Share it here. Share it. I think that's it. If y'all don't know who else to share it to, let me know. I'm gonna share it to this person. All right. Sure. Yeah, I deafened on VC. Okay, well, so yeah, if you just got here, yo, what's up? Happy Halloween. I know it's not Halloween yet, but still, happy Halloween. This is Star Night Andylex, and I'm gonna be reacting to Tainted Marth's Creepypasta. Due to popular demand, a lot of people are hitting me up asking me, hey, you should watch it, you should react to it. And I'm like, all right, everyone, calm down. I'll do it. I promise. So here we are. Fast forward to today. So let's start. Yeah, but remember what I said. Make sure to like the stream, sub to my channel, and also do me a big favor and sub to Tainted Marth's channel and like his video. Well, you know what? Let me share the link. I'm gonna share the link in chat. Hopefully it lets me share it. Let's see. Okay. Live. Click the link. Here's the link to the video. Right there. Oh, cool, I can. Perfect. All right, let's start. It's creepy music.
A good friend of mine has been working in the anime and manga industry for a long time, but a few months ago, he told me a tale so bizarre.
Oh no, Marth, don't tell me. Does your uncle work for Shonen Jump? Is he Oda's editor too? Because my uncle is also Oda's editor. I didn't know both their uncles worked for Oda. What a coincidence.
So
Yo, Cube, what's up?
that it left me questioning the very boundaries of human creativity and the dark recesses from which it springs.
This is pretty
He
cool.
spoke of things that, even now, I hesitate to recount, as it could possibly reveal a dark secret that might cast my most beloved work in manga history and its creator in a negative light. Yet, I feel compelled to share what I've learned for reasons I cannot fully explain.
Who is
I will
it?
now recount, in the words of my friend, what he
I
told me
assumed
that
it was
night.
your uncle.
I won't reveal his name. You soon understand why.
Whoa, what was that? What was that?
It was an evening like any other, where we were out drinking, as is customary in Japan, after a day of work, a tradition meant to ease the burdens of labor and hierarchy. A colleague introduced me to a man, an assistant working under Ishiro Oda. As the evening wore on, the drinks flowed freely, dulling our senses. Laughter filled the air, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off.
Nami's mouth?
I felt like someone was watching me, as though a heavy shadow was hovering above my head, pulling me towards something dark. At first
Oh, we've
I
all
thought
felt that.
it was just the alcohol making me feel uneasy, but soon enough, I would discover the truth.
Did you say Iago? That's such a cool name.
It was just the alcohol making me feel uneasy, but soon enough, I would discover the true source of this feeling. The evening gathering was winding down, and one by one, people began to leave the pub. I made my way home, and the guy who worked for Oda was walking in the same direction.
Did you film this, Marth?
As he explained, he was headed to the same train. I didn't think much of it, and we made small talk while the snow drifted lazily from a cold, starless sky. But soon, the true nature of our meeting began to unfold. After a few minutes, and without warning, the assistant suddenly stopped, his breath hanging in the frigid air. Perplexed, I turned and asked him what was wrong.
There's the breath.
His
I was
eyes
like,
were
there better
filled
be
with
breath.
a haunted dread, as if he had gazed upon something unspeakable, something that had burrowed deep into his soul and left a scar that would never
I know what you're talking about. It's seeing One Piece spoilers. That's the feeling I get.
heal. What's wrong? I asked again, the silence of the empty streets amplifying my unease. He hesitated for a moment, one that felt as though it
It's
lasted
not
an
Iago.
eternity, and his hands moved to his lips before he whispered, I've been carrying a terrible secret, and I don't think I can bear it alone any longer. His fingernails were unnaturally chewed down, and his eyes
Andy
looked
Crusoe.
wild and disturbed. Cold seeped through my skin as I listened, his words heavy with a strange and unspoken burden.
My cat's
I
getting
wanted
really
to tell him
annoyed
to
here.
forget it, to save it for another time, but something in his voice, something primordial, kept me rooted to the spot.
Primordial?
That's when he told me about Shidara Kenji.
Or it's
Kenji, he explained in
primordial.
hushed tones,
Same thing.
was an editor,
Yo, what's
an
up,
unknown
Will?
artist who worked in Oda's shadows. Few knew of him, and even fewer cared to acknowledge his existence. There was something wrong about Kenji, something that lay beneath the surface of his being, like a deep
Did you just say an artist that worked behind Oda's shadows?
festering wound
Behind it.
concealed from the light of day. The others on Oda's team kept their distance, repelled by his aura. Yet for reasons unknown, Kenji continued to linger like a specter in the office of creation. I asked what exactly was so peculiar about this man, and the assistant's voice dropped further, as if fearing the very air might carry his words to unwanted ears. Kenji, he said, had an unsettling habit. He frequently proposed ideas, suggestions
Yeah,
for the story of
shout
One
outs
Piece
to Knack,
that were disturbingly
Tainted Marth,
dark,
Will,
almost
Crusoe,
otherworldly in their depravity.
Cube. If I left
Initially
anyone out,
dismissed as
I am
twisted
sorry.
jokes,
But that
these
should be
ideas
everyone.
persisted,
Welcome, what's up,
gnawing at the
Wrench
edges
Gang?
of the creative process, until at last, Oda himself demanded Kenji to stop. These ideas felt like a vile grease stain on the most beautiful ball gown in the world, a stain that seemed to spread, with the sole intent of plunging the bright, joyful world of One Piece and its readers' happiness into endless darkness.
This cat is bad.
But by then, the damage had been done. Kenji's behavior took a sinister turn. He began following Oda. Wherever the creator of One Piece went, Kenji was always nearby. At first, Oda didn't seem to notice, but over time, friends and colleagues pointed out the shadow that was always close to him whenever he left the office. Day or night, shadowing him, always watching. Yet no one dared to act, and Oda himself did nothing, either out of fear or disbelief that Kenji could really be capable of something terrible. After all, Oda was too busy with little time to dwell on such things. But who could have guessed that
cat's trying to
Kenji's
turn my
presence
computer off.
might conceal the seed of something far darker? What I'm about to tell you is just the beginning of something which has an unimaginable extent. But I have to tell everything from the very start,
Alright, let's
piece
go.
by piece. How else could you or anyone understand the disturbed mind that infiltrated the office of the creator of One Piece and the monstrous acts he was capable of?
What did he do?
Months passed, and then came the chapter that shocked One Piece fans worldwide. The reveal of Big Mom's horrific past. The grotesque feast of
That
children
sounds really
at Mother
creepy.
Carmel. The assistant shuddered as he recalled that day, for Kenji had been seen in the office sitting at
One
his
sec.
desk.
I need to let my cat out of my room. It is just bothering me. 1 second, I'm sorry. Demonia. This cat's a little devil. Say hey. Say hello to the hollering stream. She's pure evil. Get out of here. I know. My cat wasn't helping though. I was trying to add to the atmosphere with my cat. My black cat. She was not having it. Hold on. She's gonna get the fried chicken. I have to hide the fried chicken. Hide the fried chicken from her. She's gonna get it. But don't put it in the fridge. Sorry about that. El dia... El demonia. Diablo.
Smiling a cold, knowing smile,
La demonia.
like one who had glimpsed forbidden knowledge and been irrevocably changed by it. And then he was gone. Vanished, as if the earth itself had swallowed him whole.
Alright, someone ban Knack from chat. Dogs look better than cats is a big no-no in here. It's either dogs and cats are both amazing or cats are better. Those are the correct answers, Knack.
Some claim to have seen him lingering outside the office,
play.
a pale figure watching from the shadows of a nearby park. His presence no more substantial than a trick of the eye, yet none dared to approach him. He trampled all over as he finished telling me this, and I didn't quite know how to react. Now that he had told me this, I suddenly felt a dark presence.
I'm serious. I'm being serious. There was fried chicken at home right now, and it's waiting for me. I'm gonna eat it after this. And that cat is notorious for getting the fried chicken. She is a monster.
It was a weird feeling that I couldn't really describe. The entire story seemed so unbelievable, so far-fetched. It reminded me of the horror blockbusters that had found great success in Japanese cinema in the early 2000s. A tale of a cursed person and their vile deeds. And yet, I felt a sense of unease creeping in. I was beginning to wonder why my companion felt the need to burden me with the story, why his hands trembled
This
as he
isn't a
recounted these
mukbang.
dark memories. And then he told me, I found this notebook. For some reason, his words struck me with a physical blow. What? I asked, though I could scarcely bring myself to hear the answer. Yes, he replied, his voice
And have
taut
like
with barely
Fortnite playing in
contained
the
dread.
corner or something.
I found Kenji's notebook. The proposals he made, the things he wanted to see in the story, they're all in here. Immediately, I thought of the aforementioned films.
I bet one. Okay, here's a prediction. I think what could have been in Kenji's notebook. One thing could have. What I think one thing could have been when Shanks destroys Kid with with what's it called, departure with the first, what's the name of that move he one shot Kid with divine departure. There you go. That was probably in that book. That was a massacre. It was so, I guess it was horrific to Oda's eyes, like what happened to Kid.
Where cursed videotapes were found and watched.
Does it need to be louder, Marth? I'll put it louder. My bad. Here, I'll put it louder.
An uncertain laugh escaped my lips and the thought that this guy must be crazy. He glanced around, his eyes darting to the shadows like a hunted animal. And then, from his coat, he produced the object in question. It was a plain, unremarkable notebook. Blue, faded with use, and yet, there was something profoundly wrong with it. At first, I couldn't place it, but then I saw the back, where crude sketches of One Piece characters sprawled across
That's
the
creepy.
cover. They were warped, disfigured in ways that defied natural form, as though the artist had glimpsed some incomprehensible truth about their existence and had tried in vain to capture it. He shoved the notebook into my hands with a sudden, desperate urgency. "Now it's your problem," he muttered, before turning and running off into the night, leaving me alone with the cursed artifact.
The cursed artifact?
there.
Oh my god.
The snow settling around me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The notebook was heavier than it had any right to be, as if it bore the weight of Kenshi's madness. I wanted to throw it away to rid myself of whatever evil lurked within these pages, but I couldn't. My hands refused to obey. The train ride home was a blur. And
That's
though I
me when
told
I'm trying to
myself I
work on
would
my
wait
next
until
theory.
morning,
When I have to type it
some
out,
irresistible
my
force
script,
urged me
my
to
hands
open
don't
the
want to
notebook
obey me
the
and they want to
moment I
do
sat
something
down.
else.
What I found within those pages, well, let's just say that Kenshi's mind was not the mind of a man, but something else. Something monstrous. Now I share this with you, not as a warning, but as a gateway. I'm going to read to you from Kenshi's notebook, but I must caution you, what lies within it is not for the faint of heart. It is One Piece, yes, but through the eyes of a man who had glimpsed the vast and terrible unknown. Listen closely, for once I begin, you may find it impossible to turn back. The Gorian Triangle.
Oh my god, the Gorian Triangle.
I really just wanted to take a quick look and leave it until morning. But as I mentioned before, my hand moved almost as if guided by some unseen force to the tattered pages of the notebooks and opened to a random page. The pages were littered with cryptic notes and crude, unsettling sketches, but the first thing that caught my eye was the title. Kenji must have made a mistake, for instead of Florian Triangle, the heading read
You kind of want to
Gorian
know.
Triangle. A simple slip, I thought.
Alright, if you stay to the end of the stream, I'll show you all.
At the time, but it sent an inexplicable shiver through me, as though I had just glimpsed something
Where
profane,
is it?
something that should not be. I pushed the
Here's a little preview. I do this with my hands. With this thing. I like squeezing it.
further aside and began reading. The Destroyed crew had emerged victorious at Danny's lobby, and after an extended celebration in Water 7, they received their new ship, the Sunny, which was made out of Adam wood, and shipwright Frankie also joined their crew. So far so good, everything seemed in order, just as I remembered from the manga. But then, a strange deviation occurred. Instead of discovering
what is
a
it called?
barrel floating on
Yeah,
the
okay.
water, Luffy sounded the alarm because he had spotted a body drifting on the surface. They hurried to retrieve it, but when the corpse was hauled aboard, the grim reality became clear. The body was mutilated, fingers, toes, and even legs were missing.
Oh my
It was
god.
as if something or someone had feasted upon it, leaving only a mangled husk. Sanji's face paled. He had seen something like this before, long ago.
Wait
A
to see
silent dread
this.
crept across the ship, a feeling as though the air had thickened with some unseen malign presence. In their usual adventurous spirit, Zoro and Luffy speculated that sea creatures had attacked the corpse. Nami and Usopp were stricken with horror, while Frankie didn't think much of it, brushing it off with nonchalance. Robin, who usually expected the worst and often had something morbid to say, remained unusually silent. But it was Chopper, his medical expertise sharp as ever, who leaned in closer to inspect the wounds. "These bite marks," Chopper's voice was barely a whisper. "They weren't made by fish. They are human." Sanji turned away
Animals.
immediately, retreating to the storage room with a grim expression. The events of his past, the horrors he endured alongside Seth, rushed back to him.
Oh
He
damn.
busied himself checking their food supplies, unwilling to let those memories resurface.
No wonder
The
Sanji knew
trauma
what's
of
up.
starvation, of sacrifice, had scarred him too deeply. Not long after, the Thousand Sunny was engulfed by a storm. The ship's new system, thanks to Frankie's ingenious design, allowed them to navigate the tempest with ease. Yet, when they emerged from the storm's wrath, a new horror awaited them. A thick, oppressive fog that swallowed the ship whole, blotting out the sun. The very light of day seemed unable to penetrate the dense, suffocating mist. A chill far worse than the cold of the storm crept through the crew. A primal unease gnawing at their hearts. In her head, Nami tried to make sense of this unnatural phenomenon. Then Frankie's voice cut through the silence, heavy with dread.
Apparently, this
We've
is a
entered
real
the
thing.
Gorian triangle.
Like animals, people like in crews eating each other. It's like a last resort, forbidden thing. I forgot what you call it. I saw a video about it. Well, like yeah, you have to like draw straws, right? And the one that gets the shortest end of the straw has to give themselves up, so the crew, everybody in the ship could eat them. Yeah, it's messed up. But yeah, it's like, let's say you're stranded and out at sea, and like there's like no hope for anytime soon to like get rescued. You have to survive, and someone has to take one for the team. Well, this was a belief of the sea. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It's called something. I forgot, but this reminds me of that.
He muttered. Robin's face was ashen. She whispered, "I never thought this place truly existed." Sanchi too had heard tales of this cursed region. "Over 100 ships vanish here every year," he said with a grim expression. "No one who enters this fog ever comes back." As if summoned by his words, a
the
strange
fog.
sound echoed through the mist. A low, mournful, that seemed to rise from the depths of the sea itself. It was a sound
It's the
not of this
Umibozu.
world, a spectral lament, ancient and full of sorrow.
It is called the
Nami
Gorian
cowered
Triangle.
behind
They're
Robin,
probably near
while
in that
Usopp,
area.
driven by terror, fled to his cabin to arm himself with crosses and garlic, as if such feeble human protections could ward off the horrors that lurked in this place. The crew listened in silence, each member frozen by the ghostly wail that reverberated through the fog. The thick mist
What'd you call
coiled
me?
around them,
Nah,
a
I'm-
living entity suffocating their vision
You
and
fuck.
dimming their senses. Minutes passed, and then, as suddenly as it had begun,
It sounded like you said F-U-C-K for a second.
the sound ceased.
Yeah,
Nami,
fuck you,
Chopper,
Mac.
and
Yeah,
Usopp
yeah.
collapsed to the deck, overcome with relief. "What was that?" Luffy asked, bewildered. Zoro, ever pragmatic, replied, "Whatever it was, it's gone now." I was about to turn the page when something flickered in the corner of my vision. A shadow, fleeting, yet palpable. My heart raced as I jerked my head towards the source of the oppressive sensation, but there was nothing there. Just a swaying door to the next train
The
compartment.
train. I like the train background sound. It's creepy.
I must have imagined it, or had something been there, lurking just out of sight? Shaken off the dread, I refocused on the notebook, but there was something undeniably strange about this version. It diverged in subtle, unsettling ways from the original story. Had Oda drawn inspiration from this twisted draft, only to sanitize it for the readers? I couldn't be sure, but now I was enthralled by the tale, compelled to finish reading it before the train reached my stop. I turned the page and continued. The crew drifted through the fog for hours, days, weeks. Nami fed at the end of her rope.
Vex cameo in your
All the
video.
knowledge she possessed about navigation and the weather offered her no solace. She felt a terrible weight of responsibility for the dire situation the crew found themselves in, although the others had initially assured her that this was an unnatural
What
phenomenon
about Usopp?
beyond
He'd
her
be probably
understanding.
pissing his
She could not
pants.
shake off the growing sense of guilt. After a while, the others stopped trying to reassure her, largely due to the dwindling food supply that had begun to take its toll over the past few days.
Oh
Sanchi had
no.
meticulously rationed their provisions, anticipating that upon hearing the ominous words Gorian Triangle, the crew would be
Oh,
trapped in the
no.
cursed area for longer than expected. Yet, it proved futile. Over the weeks the pantry had grown increasingly bare, and Sanchi was deprived of sleep, forced to stand watch at the door
didn't
to
get the
prevent
Vex
Luffy's
joke.
midnight feasts. He couldn't believe he found himself once again in a situation like the one with Zeph, despite all the preparations made. Zoro.
All right. Here's a real question. If you were stranded with the Straw Hat Pirates, right? And you had to eat one of them, who would you eat first? Chopper, Luffy, Usopp, Nami, Zoro, Sanji, Robin, or Jinbei? Would Jinbei be the best option? I'd probably pick I'd probably pick Jinbei first, even though I'm not a fan of fish. She's so sweet. True. Do a poll? Alright. One sec, everyone. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, how do I do a poll? I am trying to figure out how to make one, everyone. Give me a sec. Who is easiest to kill? How do you make a poll in YouTube? Type participants, pop out chat. Oh, start a poll. I got it. I got it. Who would you eat first from the Straw Hat crew? Add option. Nami, Sanji. Wait. Can I only put 2? I could only put 2? Move on. It's Chopper. Yo, what's up, Smokey? Grand Line Bound. I could only put 2? Alright. We're gonna have to do a power thing. Alright. It's gonna be between Nami and Robin. Hold on. Don't vote for yes or no. I messed it up. Oh crap, wrong thing.
Noticed Sanji's tension and offered to take over the watches. He himself had become remarkably adept at hunger. It almost seemed as if he could survive solely on alcohol if he wished. And so they alternated, yet Sanji could scarcely catch any sleep. The dire circumstances tormented him with relentless worry. Ultimately, it came to pass as it must. The last morsel of cheese and bread from the pantry was consumed. In desperation, Luffy and Usopp attempted to fish, but the sea appeared devoid of life. Nothing, absolutely nothing would bite the hook, and eventually they abandoned the futile endeavor. No one aboard knew how long they had been adrift in the thick, horrifying fog.
No. Yes!
Restless and drained of strength, they lay on
Who
the deck.
put yes?
After a time, their eyes began to play tricks on them. Usopp jumped up, pointing to what he described as an inexplicably large shadow with blood-red eyes that seemed to stare down at them through the mist. When the others turned their gazes in the indicated direction, however, they could see nothing.
Fair.
Zoro said, "You shouldn't waste your energy on new fabrications, Usopp. If you still have strength to look around, then search for a way out of this fog." Usopp grew angry. "I didn't make this up." Luffy lay apathetically on the ground, whispering, "Meat. I need meat." Chopper attempted to console Usopp. "This is a stupid situation for all of us. Don't mind Zoro's comment." Suddenly, there came a chilling sound. That eerie, bone-chilling noise was back, and this time it seemed closer. Nami's, Chopper's and Usopp's eyes were wide with terror, but they were too weak to erupt into their usual panicked cries. Luffy, Zoro and Sanji, however, summoned every ounce of strength they had left and rose to their feet. Sanji spoke. Wherever that sound is coming from, it could mean information or, better, food. Luffy and Zoro nodded stoically.
Wait a second. So Jinbei is not in the crew yet. We're in the Thriller Bark arc, right? The Pinnacle Pirates will find the One Piece.
Once again, they heard it.
Pinnacle.
And this time, a massive ship broke through the fog.
Is this some
appearing
reference
as
I'm
if
missing?
It had been drawn from the
The
depths
Marco
of despair.
picture?
Its sails were tattered, and the wood was weathered and covered in mold. Frankie and Robin joined the three who were already battle-ready, while Nami, Chopper and Usopp hid behind barrels and crates in the face of this haunting ghost ship. And then they saw it. A face, so pale, marred with deep scars, an unnaturally large mouth twisting into a grotesque smile, and a pair of round glasses perched on the nose of this despicable creature. It gazed down from the high railing upon the utterly emaciated and wretched crew. The head of this grotesque and unnatural being was crowned with an enormous black afro, and, as if that weren't already bizarre enough, a black top hat rested atop it. One last time, the creature left out a soft, and then, without warning, it leaped down onto the deck of the Thousand Sunny. Whether it was due to fear or the fact that the crew was completely starved, none of them could react quickly enough. They had to watch helplessly as this being severed Luffy's left arm with a sword drawn from a cane. Luffy screamed in pain as blood gushed from the wound, and he collapsed to the ground. Zoro, Sanji and Frankie, who had been in a state of lethargy and weakness just moments before, sprang into action and attacked this creature. Robin and Chopper rushed to Luffy's side. Chopper immediately assessed the situation and gave Robin instructions. He told her to use her Devilfruit power to seal Luffy's wound by regrowing the cut-off arm and stop the bleeding. He then grabbed the severed part of Luffy's arm and raced as fast as he could to the refrigerator to put it on ice. With a bit of luck and Luffy's extraordinary regenerative abilities, it might be possible to reattach it and restore its functionality without significant
Why is no one
complications.
coming
The
out?
cut the creature had inflicted was clean, which could be advantageous for such a procedure. Robin positioned herself in front of Luffy, who had lost a great deal of blood, and focused on defending the captain while keeping the wound sealed with her powers. Zoro and Sanji fought valiantly against the nameless horror with the afro, and after a long struggle with multiple cuts and wounds sustained, they managed to subdue it. Both
What?
knew
They're
they
fighting
could not
Brook?
kill it. After all,
What?
this human might possess information that could help them escape their dire predicament. Bound and defeated, the creature lay on the ground. Nami stood over it, looking down, while its red eyes glinted through its sunglasses. She did not like how it stared at her. It looked as if it was about to ask her a repugnant, decayed, and abhorrent question. Taking a step
Medium
back,
rare.
she addressed it.
I would have put medium.
Who are you,
I put
and
medium.
why do you attack us? As she waited for a response, she scrutinized it more closely. Its face appeared oddly bloodless, its lips cracked and parched, and its skin slavery. In a voice raspy and laced with mockery, the creature spoke. My name is Brook, and I attacked you because you looked so delicious.
Brook's a zombie.
A cold
He's
shiver
a-
ran down Nami's spine upon
He's a
hearing this.
skinwalker.
Summoning all her courage, she asked, How long have you been here, and do you know the way out of this fog?
He wears people's
Brooke
skins.
laughed, a disgusting and repulsive sound before answering. I have been here for years. Decades. I don't even know how long anymore. He laughed again.
I got it, Will. Schnitzel. 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 I don't know.
Again, his eyes filled with malice as he surveyed the crew. You all look so vibrant and tasty. How I would love to nibble on
Love.
one of you.
Oh, you
He
had fun
gazed
doing
into
this,
the
Mark.
crew's disgusted faces. What? This is a fate that befalls anyone who enters this fox sooner or later. He let out another revolting guttural laugh. Suddenly, Nami's mind clicked. The corpse that he had found a few weeks ago must have belonged to a crew that had resorted to cannibalism.
He got the
Should
clue.
Brooke's words hold any truth? Brooke continued. My crew also got lost in this fuck many years ago. Days and weeks
That's supposed to
passed,
be
and
Brooke.
before we knew it, our supplies ran out. It didn't take long for the first of us to go mad. Chaos erupted on the ship, a mutiny. Our captain, Yorkie, was a decent man. He laughed again.
The crew took over the
But in the situation we
took
were
over the
in,
ship.
no one had an ear for
Over the
reason
captain.
anymore. He was the first one we consumed. Oh, I still remember the sensation of having meat between my teeth again. How we reveled in the smell of crispy skin. He laughed again. But in the end, I was the only one left. As they say, survival of the fittest. Nami could hardly believe what she was hearing. His vile words twisted her stomach. If it hadn't been empty already, she would have vomited. Gathering all her courage, she asked, If all of this happened so long ago, why are you still alive? Brooke grinned grotesquely as he surveyed the room before answering. That's due to the devil
Wait,
fruit's
there's
power
meat in
I
my tooth?
possess.
What? Is there something
Not
in my
long
tooth?
after I consumed my last friend,
What?
an endless madness overtook me. Day and night I paced the deck as the reality of my actions caught up to me. I was utterly alone, and then I saw it. A rope, promising me an escape from all this insanity. He laughed. I tied it to the ceiling of our galley and prepared to join my former companions. I placed the noose around my neck and jumped from that table. The crew exchanged confused glances. But you are here. He laughed. The moment my soul left my body, I felt a pull. A pull so strong it seemed to come from an endless dark abyss. This pull drew me back into my body, but when I came to, something was different. Even though the noose tightened around my neck, I felt no pain, no suffocation. And so I hung
Oh
there
my God.
for years until the moisture and mold finally caused the rope to fray. During all that time, I pondered what I could do if I ever escaped this fog, but after what felt like
This
years
what?
of loneliness, I cast that thought aside. He laughed. Now, I am nothing more than a ghost haunting this place. Nami asked, How can that be? What devil fruit grants such power? Sanji, who had read the Devil Fruit Compendium as a child, whispered, The zombie know me. They posed a few more questions to Brooke,
zombie
but after a
know
while,
me?
they realized that this tormented soul would never escape the fog. He continually spoke of how much he would love
The
to
what?
eat them, so they decided to throw him overboard, hoping that the sea would finally grant him peace. But they were merely convincing themselves. Deep down, they all knew he would likely remain immobile on the ocean floor for all eternity, unable to escape his fate unless the fish showed him mercy and devoured him piece by piece until he was nothing but bones. During all the time they spent fighting and talking, Brooke's ship had long since drifted away. However, they hadn't expected to find anything on the ship that could help them in their predicament. The fight had drained the monster trio even more, and the mood was grim. Chopper then suggested taking care of Luffy's arm, as Robin was slowly running out of strength to maintain the miraculous limp with her devil fruit power. He headed to the refrigerator to retrieve the severed arm, but when he opened it, it was gone. How could this be? He searched the entire room. He even went below deck where Frankie stored the cola barrels, but he found nothing. As he made his way back up, he heard a faint crunching sound.
Oh
A
no.
shiver ran down Chopper's spine as he turned around. There stood Frankie in a corner behind the barrels, his iron jaws gnashing down on what remained of Luffy's arm. In the dark, he could see Frankie's eyes glowing red, like a machine poised for destruction. Chopper couldn't believe it. Madness must have overtaken Frankie, otherwise he couldn't explain this. How could he tell the others? All of this felt so absurd and surreal that he didn't want to accept it. Silently, he crept back up the stairs, contemplating how to explain what Frankie had done. But no words came to him that could convey the terror he had witnessed.
Is Luffy okay?
When he reached the others and was about to tell them what he had seen, he saw Luffy approaching him slowly, a weak but excited smile on his face. "Look, Chopper! Robin could no longer maintain her power, but when she released it, the arm she created just stayed there. We found a new way to use her devil fruit power. I never have to worry about blades again." Chopper felt a mix of joy and unease. He was glad that the issue with Luffy's arm was resolved, and indeed, it was fantastic to have discovered another application for Robin's power, but despite that, Frankie had eaten Luffy's old arm. He paused for a moment, and when Luffy asked if everything was okay, he decided to keep silent.
So, Frankie ate Luffy's arm, and Robin is able to grow out a new arm for Luffy. That makes sense. I guess that could happen. If Luffy like loses his leg or arm or something, like, what if? Yeah, like you're like the whole thing. Like Luffy might lose an eye, so Robin could technically take, add a piece to that body part with her powers. That is interesting. I really like that.
About what he had witnessed for the sake of the group's morale. Frankie's hunger must have been unbearable. Chopper couldn't explain it any other way. In his childlike naivety, he hoped that he could just forget what he had seen.
But then
and
it won't
that
be stretchy.
normalcy would soon return once they escaped this fog. But little did he know what unspeakable horrors lay ahead. I shuddered. Had Kenshi seriously suggested something like this to Oda? Something this dark? The train ride felt unnaturally long, and a cold, almost creeping chill climbed slowly up my legs. It felt as though some unnameable dread was trying to claw its way up from the floor,
what's up, Dex?
gripping at my ankles. I put my socks higher in an attempt to fend off the cold,
What?
which seemed
Will,
to
what
be
are you?
inducing such strange, unsettling thoughts. When I raised my head again, I saw it once more, for only a split second, clinging to the ceiling above me. I gasped, but as soon as I saw it, it vanished. I rubbed my temples, trying to steady my nerves. The alcohol, the cold, and that accursed book must have been playing cruel tricks on my mind. How else could I explain what I just had witnessed? I had just seen a dark, sinister figure hanging above me, its presence too real to dismiss entirely. I resolved to head home as quickly as possible once the train reached my stop, longing for a hot bath to wash away this unnerving sense of dread. But the ride was not over yet, and almost as if compelled by some unseen force, my eyes drifted back to the grotesque version of the Florian Triangle, eager to
The
finish reading the
Gorian
haunting
Triangle.
tale. Days passed, and the crew was at the end of their strength. The human body can only survive so long without food, and all attempts to actively escape the fog had been abandoned. No one had the energy to do much of anything anymore. Luffy, always the one most affected by hunger, was the first to lose his composure, but it didn't take long before the others began seeing things too. Shadows in the depths of the mist, gigantic and menacing,
Well,
like dark creatures from...
Real talk. Luffy did want to eat Chopper, I think, when they first met. So, Chopper might be the first to go, minus Luffy's arm.
ancient forgotten times. Alongside the gnawing hunger, fear and frustration crept in. Arguments broke out among the crew,
That's all they
and
said.
accusations that would have once been unthinkable slipped through the mouths of these once tight
So
comrades.
Zoro would say.
This cycle of despair stretched on, but then, 3 weeks and 4 days after the last of the pantry had been emptied, they found themselves facing the same dreadful situation Brooke had once encountered. Weak and tearful, they sat in a circle, exhausted and on the brink of madness. It was Frankie who finally voiced the unspeakable, what many of them had already been silently contemplating for days. "One of us has to make the sacrifice," he said. When Chopper heard Frankie utter these words, a cold wave of dread washed over him. The memory of Frankie standing in the dark corner below deck, devouring Luffy's arm, was still fresh in his mind. "If we want to survive," Frankie continued, his voice disturbingly calm, "one of us has to die. And let's be honest, I'm mostly made of metal. There is no point in considering me for this."
That's
task.
true. He shouldn't eat.
Chopper looked
Frankie
around the
shouldn't-
circle in disbelief as Frankie's words hung in the air. None of his friends were protesting. No one was even shaking their head in refusal. In fact, they seemed almost resigned, as though this dark thought had been lingering in their minds for some time. Chopper no longer recognized them. Was this truly the same crew that had accomplished so much good since he had joined them? After a brief silence, Sanji spoke. "Emergency food." Chopper shuddered. He had heard those words before, shortly after he joined the crew.
Oh
Sanji
no!
jokingly referred to him as emergency food back then. "Emergency food," Sanji repeated, this time louder, his voice cold. All eyes suddenly turned to Chopper. Sanji began to list dishes, almost casually as though discussing the evening dinner. "Reindeer stew, grilled reindeer, tender reindeer ribs," he said, ticking off each meal as though it were nothing. As he recited the various ways to prepare reindeer meat, the crew's eyes widened. Luffy was practically drooling at this point. Without warning, arms shot up from the ground, pinning Chopper in place. Robin had used the last of her strength to immobilize him.
Oh
She spoke
no!
calmly, but with a chilling edge to her voice. "Nami, search his pockets. If we find the rumble boards, we can force him to transform him into this giant monster. If he's that large, we'll have enough meat to last for weeks."
Oh my god!
Driven to madness by overwhelming hunger, the others nodded in agreement. It was a brilliant plan, they thought. Even Frankie added, "If he's as weakened as he is now, he won't pose much of a threat. We just have to kill him quickly enough, so he stays big and doesn't shrink back down from exhaustion or unconsciousness." Chopper's heart pounded in his chest as his closest friends, his
It is logical.
family, prepared to butcher him. They were no longer the straw-hat pirates he had known. He thrashed, desperately trying to break free, but before he could even cry out in the heat of the moment, Nami forced 3 rumble boards into his mouth, making sure he swallowed them. It didn't take long. His last thoughts were fragments of disbelief. "Why? You're my friends.
Wait,
Help!"
isn't 3 rumble balls bad? Doesn't it become like a weird looking little monster?
And then he lost control. The monstrous force surged from within him, but the monster trio didn't hesitate. Before Chopper, now in his monster point form, could cause any damage, Luffy and Sanji had already knocked him down, and Zoro, with a precise slash, severed his head from his body.
Oh
This
my
was
god!
the end of Tony Chopper.
Wow. With the sound effect of slashing.
Sanji quickly set to work, expertly butchering the body of his friend and storing the parts they didn't need immediately in the freezer. Before long, he had prepared what the others claimed to be the best ribs they had ever eaten. They sat around the table, weak but finally full, a strange, deep weariness washing over
You
them.
are my friend.
When they awoke,
they play.
they couldn't believe their eyes. The thick, impenetrable fog had lifted, and they were once again surrounded by the vast, open ocean under the sun's warm embrace. The crew erupted in joy, leaping to their feet, hugging
They
one
lost
another
their doctor?
until reality came crashing down. The price they had paid to escape that horror was steep and cruel. Tears began to flow not long after, and Luffy even suggested throwing the remaining meat overboard, unable to bear the thought of what they had done. But Sanji grew angry, snapping, "No, we don't waste food here. Especially not this." He paused, his voice hardening. "We honor the sacrifice Chopper made by using every last bit. Is that clear?" The crew, solemn and heartbroken, nodded in agreement. Over the next few days, they consumed the remaining parts of their beloved ship's doctor until they finally reached a new island. They all made a silent pact, a vow unspoken but deeply understood. They would never speak of this again.
They need it. Oh, this is
Beneath
perfect.
this text
Now Locke could join their crew because they don't have a doctor anymore. Perfect.
were grotesque, nauseating drawings of a zombified Brook, his ghostly grin stretched unnaturally wide. Next to it, another sketch depicted Chopper's wide, terrified eyes, frozen in horror, followed by a chilling scene where Luffy's Sanji and Zoro brought him down. The imagery was deeply disturbing, nothing at all like One Piece. I jolted upright as the train screeched to a halt. The shrill sound of iron wheels grinding against coal tracks pulling me out of the nightmarish trance that had overtaken me while reading that passage. Shaken and unsettled, I quickly shoved the notebook into my bag and made my way off the train, eager to get home and shake off the lingering unease. Finally, I made it home.
Nothing
The
happened.
snow was falling more heavily now, and the wind had picked up to a near storm force. I lived about 15 minutes from the train station in a small apartment. It wasn't much, but the rent was affordable and the neighbors were quiet. Before heading up the stairs to my apartment, I stopped briefly at the vending machine outside to grab a beer. I needed it after all, the unsettling events of the day. A cold beer and a hot bath. That was exactly what I needed. I was just about to put the key into the lock when I heard a voice behind me. Startled, I dropped the beer and quickly turned around. Standing there was my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Nishimura. She spoke again. "It's late. Stop with all the noise." I bent down to pick up the fallen can. When I straightened up, I asked her, "What do you mean? I just got home." She looked me over head to toe, her gaze piercing. I could tell from her expression that, based on my work
Can't get over
clothes, she
it.
had realized I couldn't have been the source of the noise she'd been hearing. "I'm sorry," she said. "I thought I heard a noise from your apartment.
I'm sorry.
Sleep well." She turned and headed back to her own apartment. I could hear the sound of her locking all 5 of her door locks. Old people can be quirky. Finally, I opened my door and stepped into my place. It wasn't a particularly large apartment, and work-related items were scattered everywhere. Being a mangaka myself, responsible for drawing backgrounds and inking scenes at my job, I naturally had plenty of manga merchandise and figures from my favorite series around the place.
I like the
My
color,
greatest
the
pride,
pictures that
however,
are up.
was a signed copy of Shonen Jump from Oda himself. It was vacuum sealed and displayed prominently in a frame near the entrance, in full view of anyone who stepped inside. I looked at it, smiled and whispered, "Thank goodness Oda writes One Piece and not Kenji." I headed straight to the bathroom and set the bath to start filling in 5 minutes with wonderfully hot water. I slipped out of my clothes, turned on the TV in the living room to keep my place from feeling too quiet, and went back to the bathroom. The tub was almost full, and just as I was about to get in, I suddenly remembered the notebook. I wanted to relax, but the notebook tugged on my thoughts. I had left the beer on the counter in the hallway as well, so I headed back to the living room to grab the notebook from my bag. I fished it out and was about to grab the beer when the TV flickered for a moment.
That would
I
be a
turned
really
around
good
to check
One
what
Piece,
was
like
going on, but when I
one
looked at
shot.
the screen,
like
it was just the
a
usual
what if,
late-night talk
like a
show
horror
that
one,
always played
if
at
they're
this
willing to
hour.
do that.
Strange.
I hope
I couldn't
Oda's
remember
watching.
the last time I had reception issues. I shook it off, grabbed the beer, and finally settled into the warm, inviting bath. The steam enveloped me, and I immediately popped open the can, taking a long, satisfying sip.
What is he drinking?
Then, I hesitated for a moment. But curiosity got the better of me. I reached for the notebook once more, though this time, I opened the first page. There wasn't much to see, just the name Chidara Kenji, and a sketch of a small, shadowy figure. It almost looked like Imu, but without the crown. Odd. I turned the page. The title read, "The Syrup Village Massacre." Luffy, Zoro, and Nami reached one of the Gecko Islands with the help of 2 small boats.
Is that why? Okay, because Usopp was not mentioned once in the other tale, in the previous one. Is it because he was killed?
Arriving at the shore of Syrup Village. Not long after setting foot on the island, they encountered a young man, roughly the same age as them. He introduced himself with an air of grandiosity, calling himself the great Captain Usopp and claiming to be the ruler of the village. Before long, the four became fast friends and ventured into the village for food. Luffy revealed that they had come in search of a ship and a new crewmate. Usopp immediately volunteered himself as the captain for the three, but they politely declined. I paused for a moment, struck by how familiar this all seemed. This sequence was unfolding exactly like the original story. Had Kenshi initially followed the established narrative before his descent into something darker? I took another sip of beer and skimmed over the introduction of the other characters, everything still appearing relatively normal. But as I turned the page, I nearly jumped out of my skin.
This is the
What greeted me on the next page was a
that
grotesque
Yellow
drawing of
Jackets
Django.
meets One
Unlike
Piece.
his
Isn't
usual
that like a
comical
cannibal where
appearance,
the
there was
soccer
something
team meets
deeply
each other?
unsettling about this version of him. His usual sunglasses were missing,
Nah, what's the
exposing
name?
his
There's
disturbing...
I forgot. There's a movie. It's based on a true story where like there's a soccer team and that are going to play a soccer game, and their plane crashes in some snowy area and they had to eat each other to survive. Yeah.
heart-shaped eyes.
I forgot what it was
Beneath them
called.
were dark, sagging bags that suggested he had slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, veins like cracked glass sprawling
Django?
across the whites of them, as if he'd been rubbing them raw or enduring some unspeakable strain.
Rubbing it
He
raw.
smiled, but the grin revealed no teeth. Instead of his usual hypnotic ring blades, he held two massive meat mallets, both encrusted with what looked horrifyingly like bits of flesh or skin.
I never watched Yellow Jackets,
Below
but I
this,
kind of
there
read
was
what I
another
think it's about cannibalism.
sketch. This one of Captain Kuro.
Or unless it's
At first
actually about
glance,
that
Kuro
soccer
didn't
team.
appear all that different from the original, but something about this deception of him was fundamentally wrong. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet deeply disturbing. I couldn't pinpoint what exactly made him so terrifying in this drawing, but the feeling was unmistakable. A cold, creeping dread that sent a chill through my bones.
Bones.
I took another long sip of beer, trying to calm my nerves, and continued reading from the part
Alive.
where Luffy and Usopp spied on Kuro and
That's what it's
Django.
called?
Luffy and Usopp had just discovered that Usopp's father was none other than Yasop, one of Shanks' crewmates, and were eagerly swapping stories and memories. The two boys were having fun, and it seemed like Luffy had just found another crewmate when his attention was drawn to a figure in the distance. It was Kaya's butler, Klahadore. Usopp, never fond of the man, became immediately suspicious when he saw Klahadore meeting with a shady character. Neither of them could tell who that was, but Klahadore addressed the man as Django. Lurking at the edge of the cliff, the two eavesdropped on their conversation. To Usopp's horror, Klahadore revealed his true identity as the notorious pirate Captain Kuro. Kuro was laying out his sinister plan to Django, how he intended to seize Kaya's fortune. "Listen carefully," Kuro hissed, his voice dripping with malice. "I worked too long for this. I want to live my life in peace."
Wait, you mean Jeffrey Donner? Wait, Dahmer. No, wait. Donner Party. What do you mean by that? It is also how Wendigos are made from cannibalism. What?
Without
is
the
he
Marines
talking
breathing
about?
down my neck. You and the crew are going to help me. I know how much you enjoy killing. Django nodded silently. Kuro continued. It's
Doesn't-
crucial that she
doesn't
signs this will
Chopper
first.
kind of look like a
And after
Wendigo
that,
when he's like in his monster
You
form.
can do
I think.
what you
I could be
usually
wrong.
do with them. Usopp, shaken with
Wendigos
shock and
have
rage,
horns, right?
immediately began thinking of ways to stop the atrocity he had just overheard. But before he could act, Luffy, brash as ever, broke cover and yelled from the cliffs, "Don't you dare touch Kaya!" What happened next unfolded in mere seconds. Usopp grabbed Luffy's arm, desperate to pull him back, but it was too late. Django, his expression darkening with malevolent glee, uttered coldly, "1, 2, Django." In the blink of an eye, Django flung his two massive grotesque meat mullets up the cliffside. They soared with horrifying speed, their twisted surfaces still covered in the grisly remnants of whatever or whoever they had bludgeoned before. Luffy barely had time to react. One of the hammers struck him, but thanks to his rubber body, it only knocked him backwards, sending him crashing to the ground with a dull thud. Usopp, however, was not so fortunate. The second mallet connected squarely with his head. Where once there had been the familiar face of the boy who had dreamed of becoming a brave warrior of the sea, there was now nothing but a bloody ruined stump. His headless body stood for an agonizing second before collapsing to the ground. The shattered remnants of Usopp's skull and face were scattered across the grass.
Well, it looks like they're never gonna beat Dressrosa.
A sickeningly macabre sight. The mallets boomeranged back into Django's hands with an eerie precision, their bloody surfaces gleaming in the faint light. Kuro smirked, his eyes cold and calculating. Well done. That should take care of things. Now let's move on to the rest before anyone finds them. A shiver ran down my spine. This was unsettlingly different from the story I knew. Had Oda chosen this version, Usopp would have never become part of the Straw Hat crew. And what in the world was that brutal execution that befell the crew's sniper? I took another swig from the
Jeffrey
can,
Dahmer,
my
yeah.
hands now slightly trembling, and the water, why had it grown so cold, so unnaturally fast? Japanese bathtubs were usually great at maintaining the temperature, but tonight,
okay.
it felt as if the very warmth was being drained from the room itself. I set the notebook down on the stool next to the tub and leaned forward to adjust the temperatures on the panel, when suddenly, the atmosphere in the living room shifted. Where once excited voices from a lively talk show echoed, now there was only a strange
Yeah, I was like
persistent
Donner,
static.
Dixon, like I was
The
thinking of the.
reception cut out again?
I was
I
thinking of the
considered whether
reindeers.
I
I'm like,
should
wait,
get
Jeffrey
out and check
Donner?
the
Which one?
TV,
Which
but
what's
then,
going on?
through the white noise, something else crept in. A wet, rhythmic sound. A slow, deliberate chewing. Occasionally, there was a rustling, like something moving through dense foliage, or like a hand brushing through leaves. And then the chewing again. It was grotesque, and after everything I had experienced since leaving the bar, that sound, so mundane yet so wrong, filled me with a deep primal fear. I sat in the tub covering like a child, pulling the blanket over the head to hide from unseen horrors, my breath caught in my throat. What was this? I strained my ears, unsure if I should move, unsure if it was even real. And then, without warning, the talk show burst back to life, shattering the nightmarish ambience with its cheery over-the-top banter. The sharp contrast was almost overwhelming. My muscles relaxed, though slowly, hesitantly. I let out a deep breath, one I hadn't realized I'd been holding, and for a few minutes I just listened to the artist on TV. The rational part of me began to assert itself again. It must have been a glitch, I reasoned. A channel jump or some stray interference from another program.
Yes, that's what it was.
Somewhere, someone was probably watching a horror movie, and that's what I'd caught a snippet of. That had to be it. I laughed nervously, feeling almost embarrassed by how spooked I had been. The beer wasn't helping either, making everything feel more surreal. I checked the water temperature again. It was fine. I increased it by a couple of degrees, letting the heat sink back into my bones, and leaned back.
Man, Django
How
taking
ridiculous
out
for a grown man to be
Usopp.
shaken by a little interference. To prove to myself it had all been in my head, I reached for the notebook again, determined to finish the story. Luffy had little time to mourn the death of his newly found friend and ran as fast as he could back to the village to tell the others what he had just witnessed. He had just finished recounting the events to Zoro and Nami when 3 boys suddenly jumped out from a bush. One of them shouted, "You're lying! Our Captain Usopp would never die so easily!" Luffy looked at the tree with a grim expression and said, "I'm sorry, but that's the truth. And if we don't do something soon, the same will happen to Usopp's friend." The boys were shocked, unable to process the idea that their beloved captain was dead, just like that. They ran off toward the location Luffy had described, determined to see for themselves. Nami wanted to stop the boys, knowing after what Luffy had told her that it wasn't a sight for children, but Zoro held her back, his voice cold and detached. "We have other priorities right now if we want to avenge Usopp and save Kaya. There might even be a reward in it for us. After all, we need money for a ship." Nami was appalled by Zoro's lack of emotion. But what had she expected? Before becoming a pirate, Zoro had been a bounty hunter, chasing people for money. Unable to argue against his cold logic, she nodded, and the three quickly formed a plan. Zoro and Nami would head to the shore to stop the rest of Kuro's crew, while Luffy would run to Kaya's house to warn her of the impending danger. Luffy arrived at Kaya's house, pounding on the window where she had sat earlier that day. He shouted her name, "Kaya! Kaya, it's important, let me in!" It didn't take long for Mary, one of her butlers, to come around the corner with a weapon in hand, yelling, "What do you want with the lady? She's sick and she needs a rest. What you're doing is trespassing." Unfazed by the threat of a gun, Luffy rushed over to Mary, telling him everything that had transpired. Mary spoke. "If this is another of Usopp's stories, I swear I'll..." But he didn't get a chance to finish his sentence. Great long blades like claws sliced through him from behind, cutting him cleanly into pieces.
Oh.
As Mary collapsed to the ground, Luffy saw who was responsible for the gruesome act. Kuro.
Oh no, what's gonna happen to
Without
Kaya?
hesitation, Luffy swung at Kuro. Surprised by Luffy's speed, Kuro took the first hit and was knocked to the ground. But before Luffy could land another blow, Kuro vanished. Luffy, confused, spun around, trying to find him, when suddenly he felt it. Small, shallow cuts started to cover his body. Kuro must have been moving at an unimaginable speed.
Mary's okay.
Luffy, weak against blades, decided to take a risk. He grabbed a large rock nearby and began swinging it wildly, forcing Kuro to keep his distance. The pirate captain, seemingly impressed by Luffy's spirit, perched himself on a tree branch near Kaya's window. He spoke. "Why do you interfere with my business?" Luffy, catching his breath, responded, "I won't let you kill anyone else. She's Usopp's friend." Kuro let out a sinister laugh. "I couldn't care less who that long-nosed clown was friends with. She's a means to an end, and I will have what's rightfully mine. What does it matter to you anyway? You're a pirate too, aren't you?" Luffy was unable to respond before Kuro said, "I don't have time for this. Soon Django will be done with the girl, and then this matter will be resolved once and for all." Luffy froze. "Django? I thought he was coming ashore with your crew." Kuro chuckled darkly. "You foolish boy. My crew is arriving at the shore. Yes, but Django? He's already inside the house. You see, he has quite the talent for persuasion." Luffy was stunned. How could this be happening? What do I have to do to make you stop your plan? Kuro's expression grew darker. "Die." The battle raged on for a few more minutes, but Luffy couldn't keep up with Kuro.
Oh no.
He was on the verge of a desperate final move, hoping to break Kuro's claws, when he suddenly heard a loud 1, 2, Django. And then came the sound. It wasn't just the usual thud of impact. It was wet, disturbingly meaty. A grotesque squelching like something thick and organic being torn apart, mixed with the unmistakable noise of bones cracking under pressure. It wasn't the sort of sound anyone could mistake for furniture toppling or walls being struck. No, this was unmistakably flesh. The kind of noise you hear when something soft and fragile is mercilessly beaten, ruptured from within. The nauseating combination of smacks and splatters made Luffy's stomach turn, and for a brief moment the air around him felt thicker, as if suffused with the lingering essence of whatever had just been done inside that room. That was it. He had failed to save Usopp's friend. She had probably signed the will just before it happened. Now all he could do was survive. He grabbed 2 large pillars that stood near the estate's entrance and used them to fling himself as far away from Kuro as possible. Then he ran.
I'm trying to figure out what
As he
happened. What
sprinted
cut?
away, he spotted the bodies of Usopp's 3 young friends, ruthlessly executed and discarded like nothing.
What?
He swallowed hard and ran even faster. Halfway through his escape, he encountered Zoro and Nami, both reporting that the enemies at the shore had been nothing more than weaklings in cat costumes. Zoro had made quick work of them, but Luffy pushed them to keep moving, urging them to run. As they ran, Luffy explained everything that had happened and how he couldn't defeat Kuro. Zoro, eager for a challenge, immediately wanted to fight Kuro himself, but Luffy as his captain ordered him not to. Once they reached the shore, Nami quickly gathered her treasure and loaded it onto Kuro's ship. They hoisted the anchor and set sail, but before they could breathe a sigh of relief, they saw Kuro approaching at terrifying speed. He vanished from the cliffs, only
The
to
picture of
reappear in an
Kuro
instant on
looks
their
kinda
vessel.
creepy.
Zoro barely managed to block his clawed strike, saving Nami's life. The impact sent Kuro flying into the water, unable to catch up to his former ship. Relieved, Nami and Luffy collapsed on the deck, overwhelmed with guilt. They had left the village in the hands of a murderer. Zoro, however, simply remarked that the villagers would be safe. Kuro's only goal was to live quietly, and as long as they kept silent, the marines wouldn't intervene. The rest of the village should be left alone. Luffy and Nami were appalled by his reasoning, but Zoro assured them that this was their only option. They could return later to seek revenge for Usopp and the others. Weighed down by guilt and feelings of helplessness, the three sailed away, burdened by the knowledge of the horrors they had left behind. I put the notebook aside and sank a little deeper into the bath. I was sweating heavily. Perhaps I had set the temperature too high after
Sweating.
all. No matter. I had planned to head to bed soon anyway, but my thoughts still lingered on that strange notebook. Would One Piece have ever been as successful as it is today if it had taken such a dark turn? What was the point of all this? Why had Kenshi suggested such an extreme version to Oda? And why wasn't he immediately replaced after such a proposal?
A what
Clearly,
if scenario?
this guy belonged in
An
entirely
alternate
different
universe of One
productions.
Piece.
Manga of a much darker nature. This certainly had nothing to do with One Piece. Maybe the guy from the bar had just been pulling my leg? Yeah, this had to be some kind of morbid joke.
I remember
It
my
was simply
uncle talking about this
unimaginable
to me.
that Kenshi had ever been part of Oda's team, if he even
About
existed
because you know
in the
he's
first place.
he was one of the editors for
I
Oda.
wiped the sweat from my forehead,
yeah, I've heard the
splashing a
story
handful of
before,
water onto
pieces
my
of it.
face. Whoever
I'm
had
glad
gone
you
through the
finally
trouble
shared it,
of
Marth.
making this notebook just to play such an elaborate prank had to be no less deranged than the supposedly real Kenshi. I shook my head and chuckled. This was definitely something I'd have to tell my co-workers at work. What a story. I decided I'd take the notebook with me. It would surely spark some laughter and disbelief.
He's not gonna make it to work.
I
is
got
he?
out of the bath and dried myself off. The air was unpleasantly cold, as I had only turned on the air conditioning after coming home. The cold air swept over the still damp patches of my skin, which no amount of toweling seemed to fully dry. After brushing my teeth, I put on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, then rolled out the futon on the floor. The TV was now playing nothing but infomercials. I had just settled in when, without warning, all the lights in the television went out. A power outage? I couldn't believe it. This really wasn't my day. My hand groped in the dark for my smartphone, but I had left it in the hallway. I was about to get up when I heard it. The sound of chewing. That unsettling, wet smacking noise was back. This time it came from the hallway. I listened
Frankie.
again, my heart pounding. What the hell was going on? Maybe this was part of some hidden camera show. Someone was definitely playing a very unfunny prank on me. Had I even locked the apartment door? Suddenly, I heard the rustling of leaves again. But how? I had no plants in the hallway. This entire situation was deeply unsettling, and I could feel the fear rising in my chest.
Yeah, I was thinking.
My heart.
Without Usopp, they probably wouldn't even make it out of Thriller Bark. Like I was also thinking, like, man, they were able to make the Straw Hats were able to do Annie's lobby without Chopper or Usopp. Like that's weird. I'm like, not weird, but like must have been, that'd be interesting to see how it would be without two crewmates.
Sank, but I gathered every bit of courage I had and called out, "Who's there?" The moment I spoke, the sounds stopped dead in their tracks. I pressed on, my voice a little shakier now. Hello? Is this some kind of joke? I don't
Well-
think it's... I didn't get a chance to finish.
To be fair, wasn't it like after Thriller Bark is when like they changed Chopper's design to like that little chibi moneymaker? So to be fair, like, yeah, it would have been a good time for Chopper to die around that time because that's when they would change his design. And I could see why Marth put Thriller Bark. Or
A sudden
pre
deafening
Thriller
stomping
Bark
noise,
for
growing
his
louder
death.
and closer with terrifying speed, cut me off. I jumped up and stumbled backwards,
But yeah, the crew probably
crashing
failed
over
on
a small
Thriller Bark.
side table. I braced myself for the worst, certain something horrific was coming for me, when, just as suddenly, the lights flickered back on, and the TV resumed to its infomercial about kitchen appliances. I cautiously sat up, scanning the room.
Moria Pirate
There was
King?
no one. I was completely alone in the apartment. My heart still racing, I flinched as I heard Mrs. Nishimura from the next door bang on the wall with what I assumed was her cane. "I said keep it down!" she shouted.
Oh, I love
Recovering from the
Mars'
second
old
shock
lady
of the night,
voice.
it dawned on me that she might have been hearing those strange noises even before I came home. It was 2 a.m. I couldn't blame her for being angry. But how was that possible? Slowly, I got to my feet and grabbed a bottle of sake from the shelf next to the TV. Armed with it, I was ready to check the storage closet and wardrobe. If someone was hiding in this apartment, I'd find them. But then my eyes fell on the futon. Right there where I had just been lying, where I had leaped up in terror, and where the terrifying stomping had abruptly come to a halt, as if something had stopped dead in its tracks,
What?
was something impossible. The notebook. Kenshi's notebook. But how? I was certain I had left it in the bathroom. How could that be? As perplexed as I was by the strange occurrence, I had to put the matter aside for now. Whoever had been in my apartment must have placed the notebook there. I tightened my grip on the bottle's neck and cautiously began my search. Slowly and deliberately, I checked every possible hiding spot in my apartment where a person could fit. But nothing.
Mother Caramel?
Absolutely nothing.
The old lady, yeah. Perfect.
I made my way to the front door and noticed, to my dismay, that it wasn't locked. Could the person who put this horrible prank on me have slipped out that quickly? But how could I not have heard them come in? I hadn't drunk that much, certainly not enough to miss someone entering my home. And those wet, slurping sounds I heard while sitting in the bath. It should have been impossible for anyone to come through without me noticing. The bathroom door opened directly into the hallway. Then again, maybe I had been too engrossed in that damn notebook to realize what was happening around me. The thought sent a shiver up my spine.
I hear like a vague like voices in the background. Is that like One Piece audio but very low from the anime? I can't tell. It sounds like it's in Japanese.
The kind that lingers and digs its claws deeper the more you try to shake it off. I locked the door now, making sure to leave the key in from the inside. On top of that, I made a mental note to take a page from Mrs. Nishimura's book and install more locks.
It's a Japanese game show.
After everything that had happened, I finally understood why she had 5 of them. Next, I went around checking all the windows, making sure every single one was properly shut. The notebook? I decided to give it no more attention, at least for tonight.
I want one more story. Come on.
I picked it up from my
Read the
futon
notebook.
and stuffed it into my work bag. Sleep didn't come easily. My thoughts kept swirling around the day's bizarre events.
Why are you teasing
the
me?
inexplicable, the unsettling. But eventually, my eyelids grew heavy and my mind, exhausted from chasing shadows, finally succumbed to the darkness. The next morning felt as though nothing had happened. I had a mild headache, most likely thanks to the beer from the night before. But that was nothing a strong coffee and a glass of orange juice couldn't fix. I quickly got dressed, grabbed my briefcase and headed out for work. I stopped by the kombini around the corner to pick up a couple of onigiri. Tuna mayo was always a safe bet, but my favorite, the one with egg yolk, was almost always sold out at this hour. I got lucky though, and found 2 of those little treasures waiting for me in the fridge. The rest of the commute was uneventful, just as it always was, and soon enough I arrived at work. I was the first one in the office and had barely sat down when suddenly my colleague Urukasu placed his hand on my shoulder. I jumped, startled, and he laughed.
What? We're the last to leave
Lucas,
last night, the first one here this morning. Color me impressed.
Wait, what did he call him? Lukasu? Hold on, I need to hear that again.
My colleague Urukasu placed his hand on my shoulder. I jumped, startled, and he laughed.
One of the last to leave last night, the first one here this morning. Color me impressed.
I shrugged.
Did you hear? Sensei is sick, so there won't be a release for the next 2 weeks. That means we can catch up on some work.
What he meant was that in our line of work, everyone was usually behind schedule. The deadlines for finishing a chapter and sending it off to the publisher were incredibly tight. Most of the
Is this supposed to be a keyboard?
time, we aimed to have 2 or 3 chapters done in advance as a buffer in case of emergencies, like Sensei's illness. But over the past few months, we'd been severely understaffed, and that buffer had disappeared. Every chapter we delivered was being completed just in time. Sensei's absence was, in some small way, a relief. With his notes, we could still work ahead, getting parts done without him being physically there. Even when sick, Sensei was always reachable, trusting us to bring his ideas to life. He would just step in later to correct any parts he didn't like, or tweak a few details. I let out a deep breath and turned to Lukasu. Listen, since we got a bit of time, there's something I need to show you. I told him everything that had happened since our paths parted last night. He had been one of the first to head home. I tried not to leave out any details, recounting every strange event as clearly as I could. His eyes grew wider with every word until finally he said,
Are you sure you didn't have just a bit too much to drink last night?
I stared at him and replied, Do I look like I was completely wasted?
Yes.
Lukasu looked me over, head to toe, scrutinizing
Those
me
drinks
like a detective
that you
examining
drank
a
were
crime
obviously
scene,
beer.
and then finally said,
No, actually you don't.
I couldn't help but laugh at the absurd seriousness with which he conducted his little investigation. Then, with a smirk, he asked,
So, do you have it with you? The notebook?
I nodded and put it out of my bag. Without hesitation, he snatched it from my hands and flipped it open to the first page.
Oh,
He said,
what's this? This little figure here. It almost looks like Emu, just missing the crown.
I nodded
Emu.
and was about to respond when he added,
And the one next to it. It also seems familiar.
I froze. The one next to it? I repeated. As far as I could remember, there was only Kenji's name and that one figure. What could he mean? Lukasu leaned down, tapping his
Lukasu.
fingers on a figure that was similarly drawn, black, jagged, almost scribbled, but where the eyes should have been, there were 2 large, white, empty spaces. I blinked confused. That's strange. I could swear that wasn't there last night. Lukasu gave me another skeptical look.
Lukasu!
You were tired. Maybe you just overlooked it.
I shook my head with my words firmer now. No. No way. Last night there was only that small emu-like figure. My colleague shrugged and began flopping through the pages.
You've already read the first story, so let me take a look at the next one.
I leaned back and listened.
The Grim Reaper.
Ooh.
Luffy had just finished convincing Zoro and Usopp that none other than Nami had to be the navigator of their ship, when someone from Don Krieg's crew screamed,
So Usopp's
"It's him!
alive in this one.
Don Krieg, it's him! The one who destroyed our fleet! He's followed us all the way out here to kill us all!" Zoro couldn't believe his eyes, and even Don Krieg looked visibly shaken. There, drifting in the sea, was a large black coffin. On top of it, sitting on a small bench attached to the casket, was Dracule Mihawk, also known as the Grim Reaper. One of Krieg's men screamed, "Damn you! Why are you chasing us? What did we ever do to you?" Mihawk raised his gaze from beneath his hat, his bloodshot eyes glowing with a murderous intensity, and spoke. "To wipe your pitiful existences from this world."
Damn,
the
that
man
voice.
who had just asked the question flew into a panicked frenzy, drawing his musket to shoot at Mihawk, but it was already too late. With one swift, deliberate swing of his massive cross-shaped sword, Mihawk sliced the man, and everyone standing behind him, clean in half.
Lukasu paused his reading and said,
Strange. I remember it happening quite differently.
I chuckled and said, Didn't you hear me earlier? I told you these stories are vastly different from the original.
But then, why is Usopp alive here when you said he was killed before?
Yeah,
Lukasu
exactly.
replied, slapping the open pages with the back of his hand.
What's going
I
on?
responded, After his first story was rejected, Kenji must have adjusted things for the next version. At least, that's my guess. My colleague nodded and continued reading.
Zoro, who had been watching all of this unfold, was impressed by the swordsmanship of this mysterious man and shouted, "Hey, you!" Mihawk turned his gaze towards Zoro. "Yeah, you!" Mihawk regarded Zoro intently. What do you want, brat? Zoro drew his swords and declared, I challenge you to a duel. My goal is to become the greatest swordsman in the world. And after seeing your little performance here, I have a feeling we'll cross paths again sooner or later. So let's settle this matter right away. Mihawk paused for a moment before replying. And why should I waste my time with a hopeless worm like you?
That's
Just
exactly
as
what
he
Mihawk
finished
says, right?
speaking, Don Krieg emerged behind him, aiming a gun embedded in his armor at the Grim Reaper. But even in that split second, Mihawk swung his sword behind him so swiftly that the human eye could scarcely perceive it, and cleaved Don Krieg into bloody pieces. Afterward, he leapt from his coffin and slowly approached the rest of Krieg's crew, stoically and ominously. He advanced. Men fell to their knees before him,
No, not
begging
Jin!
for their lives, while others leapt into the sea or scrambled to escape the wreckage of the destroyed ship, but it was all in vain. The sky darkened abruptly, and a chilling wind began to blow. The crimson pupils of the Grim Reaper glowed, and the candles on his coffin-shaped vessel suddenly flickered into towering flames. One by one, he sliced through the crew as he walked past, skewering some and merely wounding others so they would suffer a slow and painful death. The cooks from the Baratier, Chef, Sanji, and all the others present gulped in awe. This man seemed to embody ultimate evil. Above his head, a shadowy figure hovered, barely discernible and fleeting like a mist, a Shinigami, a god of death. As Mihawk finished his deadly work, he turned back to Zoro and said, Well, brat, my companion here whispers
Like
to me that it's not yet your time to
figuratively
die.
or
But
literally,
since you're
that
begging for
Shinigami.
it, he sheathed his large sword and drew a significantly smaller blade, scarcely larger than a dagger, from around his neck. Zoro, immediately insulted by this disrespectful gesture, retorted, What do you intend to do with that little thing? Mihawk replied, I like to take my time with loudmouths like you. My large sword would only grant you a merciful death. This was more than Zoro's pride could bear,
Well, it's
and
right
he
there.
launched himself at
Shirigami.
Mihawk without hesitation, employing his best techniques. Yet Mihawk
Yeah,
effortlessly parried
metaphorically,
each attack while
figuratively,
inflicting
literally,
numerous
I can't,
small
I'm not
wounds in
sure.
return.
It could be
The
anyone.
fight raged on, and after a few minutes, Zoro was drenched in blood. It was a miracle he could.
Like, yeah, like, let's say, like, I could have Lady Luck fluttering above me. Oh, I could tell you got Lady Luck above you. I could see you have Lady Luck hovering. Or you got, I don't know, something like that.
Still remained on his feet. Luffy could no longer bear to watch and was about to intervene when Sanji held him back. This is a fight between men. You should know better than to step in, especially since it was Zoro who challenged Mihawk. Luffy hated these words, but he knew Sanji was right. Bloodied and barely able to move,
I know,
Zoro
I believe
stood
you.
as Mihawk
Literally.
slowly approached him. The small blade pointed directly at his
I
heart.
was overthinking
Just before
it.
it pierced Zoro's chest, Mihawk spoke. Wretched worm, you dare to challenge me? Incapable of recognizing your own weakness, do you have any last words? Knowing his end had come,
So
Zoro
Zoro's
broke
not gonna
down in
make it.
tears and said, I'm sorry, Kuina. I shouldn't have pushed you down the stairs, but I just wanted that sword so badly.
Oh my
Mihawk
god,
raised an
no.
A confession.
You went
How
there.
unexpected.
It was Zoro the whole time.
The dark figure above Mihawk's head hovered close to Zoro's ear and
The
seemed
Zoro
to
in this universe is a fraud.
whisper something to him. His eyes widened, and he let
In
out
this
a whisper.
timeline.
No, that can't be true. Then Mihawk's blade pierced his heart, and Zoro collapsed lifelessly to the ground. The witnesses to this horrific duel turned their eyes away as Luffy tore himself free from Sanji and rushed to Zoro. He lifted his friend's lifeless body off the ground and cried, Speak to me, Zoro! Can you hear me? He's dead, kid, Mihawk said. And nothing in this world will bring him back.
No.
Luffy broke into tears, blaming himself for allowing this duel to happen. Just as he began to mourn his fallen friend, Mihawk shoved him aside and took Zoro's corpse. He carried it to his vessel, opened the coffin, laid Zoro inside, closed the lid, and said, Don't worry. I'll make sure his body at least gets a second chance. I know someone who always has a use for corpses like this. Luffy screamed, But a brief, intense look from Mihawk silenced
Such a
him.
good guy.
Then Mihawk spoke. This brat wanted to become the greatest swordsman in the world? It seems he was your friend. What is your goal, boy? Luffy wiped the tears from his cheeks and answered, I will become king of the pirates! Mihawk laughed darkly. You have a long way to go if that's to be the case. But you should choose better friends than scum like him. Luffy grew furious. Zoro is no scum! Besides, I have the best sniper in the world with me! He pointed at Usopp. And my navigator Nami will effortlessly lead me to the One Piece. Mihawk raised his eyebrows again. Oh, the One Piece? Interesting. But where's your navigator, if I may ask? She must be extremely talented if that's the case.
She ran away.
She isn't here right now. She went ahead on her ship. We still had something to take care of here.
Oh no.
Mihawk spoke once more. Was your ship a caravel? Luffy nodded. I'm sorry to inform you, but it seems you've lost 2 crew members today. With these words, he stepped into his coffin boat and sailed away.
Lucasu closed the notebook, looked at me, and said,
What the hell is this sick shit?
I laughed.
What the hell is
I
this?
told you, someone must have come up with a really bad prank. My colleague pulled a lighter from his pocket and said,
We should burn it. Something so disgusting shouldn't exist. It cast a bad light on One Piece. If others find out, it'll spread like wildfire. You know how the internet is. People will upload the story and end up believing this nonsense.
I agreed that this notebook shouldn't see the light of the day, but the fact remained that someone had broken into my apartment last night. If this book had anything to do with it, I needed it as evidence in case I had to call the police. Lucasu had already fetched the trash can to burn the book, but he understood my concerns and handed the notebook back to me.
Listen, whoever came up with this vile trash needs to be locked away. Just be careful. If what you told me earlier is true, you might have a stalker on your hands.
A chill ran down my spine at his words. I hadn't considered that. Memories flooded back of how Kenji had stalked Oda. We both moved to the window and looked down at the street. At first we saw nothing, but just as I began to turn away, Lucasu said,
Hey, look over there!
What? Where? He pointed to a man dressed in black, crouched behind a bush further down the street. It seemed like he was looking in our direction.
Who's that in the
Is
back?
that?
Kenji, I replied. It had to be him. Who else could it be? Was he the one who had wreaked havoc in my apartment last night?
Down the stairs.
I felt a wave of goosebumps wash over me at the sight of him. Something was definitely off. Lucasu ran to his desk to grab his smartphone.
I'm going to take a picture of that guy.
When he returned, he tried to focus, but it wasn't easy from the distance. Then, click, the camera shutter sounded. But when we looked at the screen, the spot where the supposed Kenji had just crouched was empty,
Oh, that's
except
weird.
for a promotional stand for ramen noodles. How could this be? Had we both been distracted? And in a moment we glanced at the display, he slipped away? Lucasu and I exchanged bewildered looks. We returned to the desk, perplexed and confused by what we had just witnessed. But neither of us had an explanation. An unsettling silence crept into the room, along with the feeling that something was profoundly wrong, when suddenly, the door burst open and 2 more colleagues entered the office. I quickly stashed the notebook back in my bag.
The monster, it's the fish version of Oda with the fish head, and it swallows them alive.
And Lucasu and I agreed to not breathe a word of it to the others. The rest of the workday passed relatively calmly, but no one could predict what would happen when we left the office. End of part 1.
There's gonna be a part 2? Damn. Really, there is no One Piece creepypasta? Interesting. See, this is good creepypasta. Like, I was talking to Kusa about it. There's this Dragon Ball fan animation. I think it's called like The Warrior or something. I honestly I didn't like it. It straight off too like much from the source material of what makes Dragon Ball Dragon Ball. Marth, did what ifs in this, and yeah, it's good. It didn't stray off for what One Piece is. It's like we're still in One Piece. Like, I this is a great. Like, I loved it. Yeah, it was. I was invested. Like, I really didn't know what I was getting myself into with this. I had no idea it was gonna be about this, but yeah, I liked it. I really liked the first story was really. I really liked the Gorian Triangle. The Syrup Massacre. I feel like the Syrup Village Massacre could have been a little longer.
Luffy had little time
I still enjoy. It was good. I liked it. I really liked it. But yeah, I liked all the stories, and the Zoro one, the big reveal that he pushed Kaya off down the stairs. That's messed up. That is so messed up. But yeah, I could see this video like aging like fine wine. Like it's like it's never gonna be irrelevant. Like if that makes sense.
in.
Yeah, great job, Martha. I really liked it. I don't think I've really watched a creepypasta before. This might be my first. Oh no, I've seen some. But yeah, it might actually become a meme. What if the meme is like what Zoro pushing Kaya down the stairs, Chopper for dinner, extra rations. Imagine the cursed notebook. I'm trying to think what could be some other interesting what ifs like, um, hmm. What make a horror story of what if Luffy's crew loses to Foxy's crew in the Davy back fight? That'd be interesting. But yeah, awesome. I need to like this. I'll leave a comment soon, so keep an eye out for the comment. And if you just got here, make sure to leave a like. If you see this video, make sure to subscribe to this channel and like the video. I just reacted to, if you just got here, Oda's Secret Stalker, One Piece creepypasta to fall asleep to. I'm pretty sure there's a long, I'm not sure what else is. Hold on. Yeah, okay, it's just ... Okay.
After 30
But really good video. But yeah, if there's any other videos you want me to react to, let me know. Suggest it. I'm open to react to them. Like I said, due to popular demand, I reacted to this video. I was getting bombarded with messages left and right, and I'm like, all right, everyone, I'll do it, just in time for Halloween. But I'm planning on doing my Hunter x Hunter manga live reaction. I think I'm 3 chapters behind. I haven't read it since it came back like a few weeks ago, so I'm gonna marathon it probably on Halloween day, I think. So I'm gonna have a special Halloween stream for Hunter x Hunter. I can't wait. I heard there's a lot of dialogue, so I'm gonna see how it goes, how I feel about reading it. Because I've never reacted to Hunter x Hunter before, so it's gonna be an experience. React to the Nat guy reacting to reacting. Interesting. Okay. It'll be like an Inception. Interesting. React to the Nat guy reacting to jujitsu. And then I'm really tempted to. I'm really considering reacting to the first episode of Dan, whatever it's called. I've been thinking about it. I've been holding off from watching it, but I really want to see it. Oh my god. What is this?
Just rearranging our room, and while we have our bed up our bed frame.
I had to see that cat. I'm sorry. Okay. Well, yeah, thank you all for that. Everybody that joined. Make sure to subscribe to Tainted Marth's channel and like his video, like I said earlier. And don't forget to sub to my channel, Star Knight Andylex. Like the stream, leave a comment. That all means so much to me. And just the day before yesterday, I did a One Piece manga marathon. Make sure to check that out. And I'm also working on a theory. It's still in the workshop. I just worry that the plot is going to mess it up. So I'm being very cautious with it. But keep an eye out for my theory. More reactions. There's more to come. Yeah, no problem, Marth. I'm looking forward if you do the part 2. I want to read more. I want to listen to more of these creepypastas. They're really, I got really invested. You could get really creative with them.
Yeah,
All right, I'm going to call it here. Y'all have a good one.